Right, and we are live. So, how is it going, everyone? Thanks for tuning in. It's a bit of an odd time to stream, I guess. It's like 3:30 on a Friday. Getting started a little bit late today. Just spent like the last few hours, I don't know, working through some build issue that was really frustrating. But anyway. Back, got things building, and I've got a number of just like kind of smaller bugs that are assigned to me right now that I've kind of been neglecting for the past few days, so I thought I'd work on some of them. Hey JB Pratt, how's it going? And so that's what we're gonna do. And last time I did this on stream, it actually like worked pretty well. I think that like these like small digestible projects are nice maybe to watch, like in that they're easy to understand, easy to follow, and then it's like it's kind of quick and done, and I feel productive. You know, it's like by the end of the stream, got a lot of things out of the way, so we'll give that a shot. Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started. I think the first thing I'm gonna do, we've actually shown this a bit on stream, but there's an optimization that I've been trying to get like turned on, that I've been working on kind of for a while, and there was some bugs around it, which is like this intrinsic remember property. And what I did basically was I made it so that you could turn it on behind a flag, and I defaulted it to off so that I could test it more in the wild. And I think I've fixed all of the bugs, you know, knock on wood, I guess. But what I'd like to do is just submit a quick CL to turn this flag to be defaulting to on, so that now basically everyone will get the optimization, and I'll keep the flag there. And the idea is then at least if someone runs into another bug, there's like you know, I can give them a quick command to turn it off. But this will you know, get the optimization out there, and we'll be taking advantage of it. So so that'll be good. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's see. If we go to compose plugins, so here's the flag, and let's see, intrinsic remember, required false, that all makes sense. And so now if we want it to be enabled by default, then I think basically we change this to be not equal to false, and that should accomplish that for us. We've got the default value here, which then we'll set to true. And then here, let's just change the default value here to true. And then I set up in the do undefined usage, yes. So I added this on the transform test. I think basically I want to find out where this is used. I don't think anyone overrides it. So I think we can probably just get rid of this at the moment. Yeah, let's just get rid of it. And then we'll say intrinsic remember enabled true. So this test is going to continue working like normal, but now that optimization is enabled by default, we kind of need to go and see whether or not other tests that use this base test are, if they like changed or not. So there are a number of them. Let's yeah, all right, let's just run that. I think basically everything that starts with transform test is going to be, or ends with transform tests. So let's just open those. Control flow. Okay, so that's kind of a lot, but you know, we got to run through all of them. So, or I mean, okay, let's just do a couple of the obvious ones that. The function body transform test, this is going to be the most obvious one. Anyway, this is just taking a second to build because I changed a few things. So, how's everyone doing? We'll have a moment while this is building if anyone wants to ask any questions. Isaac says, looking good. Seems like you got a haircut. Yeah, I got a haircut. My wife cut my hair a few days ago. Thank you. I think it looks good too. She did a good job. Abir asks, hi Leland, back to your house. No, this is still my Airbnb. We're still gonna be out of the house for a little while. Actually, so next week, starting on Tuesday or something. Yeah, I think Tuesday, we're gonna be moving Airbnbs and going somewhere else. And so you'll see my scenery change yet again. But house is coming along. We're really excited to see it when it's done. So maybe, I don't know, maybe when it's done I'll do like a walkthrough stream or something, show people my new kitchen. It'd be a little weird maybe. Let's see. So Shade Farseer says, maybe off topic, but what are the plans around shared element transitions in Compose? It's a good question. So shared element transitions are really interesting, and there's we've been doing a lot of thinking around shared element transitions and also other types of animations that are similar. Like one example is like enter and exit animations. If you want to animate an element leaving the screen, these are all interesting in the world of declarative UI, particularly because these are exactly the types of animations that like declarative UI sort of make harder, right? In that the whole point with a render type function or you know, a composable function where you call it and you say, this is what I want my thing to look like. The whole point is that you're removing the notion of a state transition, right? You don't have to know what the previous state looked like. You just have to say what you want your new state to be, and then the framework handles moving it into that state. And so when you want to animate that transition, you're sort of intentionally, you're like revealing APIs to the user that like make it sort of known that that's a facade or something like that. And so we've really been trying to like kind of think real fundamentally about how to do these types of things in this world. And there's a pretty fundamental API that we're working on for the runtime that I think is sort of like it's like the missing piece to making all of this work how we want it to work. And here I'm going to go into detail about that in just a second, but let's go back to this. So stability transform test, everything passed. I think we can, let's run, what do we want to run? I think the function body skipping test is probably the most likely to be affected here. Let's run those, see if those are changed. Hey Gabriel, hey born in Bronx, from Italy no less. Nice to see you. Halo Live says also off topic, but what about PictureInPicture support? I'll have to dive in what you actually mean by that. But first, let me finish asking Shade Farseer's question, or answering, not asking. Let's look at this. So one of the things, basically this fundamental API that I just kind of alluded to, we don't really know what to call it. We're sort of at the moment calling it like composition as a value, but it's pretty interesting. So let me just kind of go over what it would mean. If we had, let's just say we've got our app here. Right now, if you think about it, you can dynamically like sort of place arbitrary content in Compose with a composable lambda, right? And so we do this all the time. This is like, what if you want a widget that like sort of wraps around things like row or column or like similar layout params, like this is what you do. Or if you want like a button and you can say, okay, you can put anything in the center of this button, then you would use a content lambda to do it. And so you place that like here, and that's just how that works. Like to place it, you call it. And when, like, let's see, so let's just call that some like group thing, right? And so now if I want to call group, then I can place stuff inside of it this way. But the thing about it is like what happens when I say, okay, so if something, then place it here, inside of like this group, right? Otherwise, place it, inside here. But here's the thing: is that in Compose, if you do this, is like when this condition changes, everything that was like inside here, or really it's like this whole sub hierarchy, it gets removed from the tree, and then all of this hierarchy gets added to the tree, and there's no connection between. And so if you had like a counter here, right? Mutable state of 0, right? And you created a button, then whatever, count. Sure. So here's our hello world button type thing, and the way that Compose works is if this condition changes, then that count is going to get reset to 0, because as far as Compose is concerned, it's like a whole new thing. But what if that wasn't the case, or like what if we could create a situation where that wasn't the case? And so what we're saying is like, what if we had some API like this, where we were able to say compose and put this in there, right? And then we could pass this to group. And as far as group's concerned, it's just a normal composable lambda, just like anything else. And like I can call it here if I want to. Like it's just a composable lambda. There's no difference there. But it has like an interesting behavior to it, where in this world, the state that's associated with it would be preserved. And really what this is saying like, go ahead and compose this content, but like wait to actually insert it into the tree, and insert it into the tree like where this lambda is called instead. And so that's sort of what this does. And this I think, I mean, you may look at this and think like, oh, well, this doesn't actually relate very much to my original question, which was like shared element transitions. But what I think is that with this API, you can build incredibly interesting things on top of it. And shared element transitions, I believe, is one of those things. Same with like enter exit transitions, and like there's just a lot of stuff. And I'm really excited about this. And this even has implications like beyond animations. Like I think that this gives us a glimpse into what a composable suspend function might mean. And lots of other different things. So anyway, this is my brief aside, but shared element transitions and related animations are something that we want to make sure that we support, but we're not jumping in eagerly to like provide APIs that we think are fundamentally flawed, and so we're trying to figure out the sort of right way to do such a thing in Compose. And I think that this unlocks it in the right way. So, all right, back to our test here. Actually, I guess I've been ignoring several things here. What do we got? Caleb says, "Hey, nice haircut." Haha, regarding build times, do you have to use your work laptop for this? Yes, I am using my work laptop. I've been doing work on my desktop and it is so much nicer and more fun. Yeah, maybe, I mean, I could get a desktop machine. I haven't thought about it. I like the convenience of having a laptop and being able to just grab it and, you know, go work in the living room and just have all my stuff there if I wanted to. So I don't know, we'll see. So Halo Live says, I read on Twitter that someone had failed to publish an application with Jetpack Compose on Play Store. Is Play Store doing library checks? No, I don't think so. They must have had trouble for some other reason. I don't think that there's there are Compose apps on the Play Store. I know that for a fact, and there's we're not making any effort to prevent you from doing so. Let's see. Lots of off-topic questions today. Off-topic questions are, I don't know if you need to label them as off-topic. They can just be questions. Will Google release a composed version of Google Map and WebView? Good question. So maybe someday, right? But not for like a 1.0 timeframe. And you know, the interop for these, like, Compose interops with existing views, and this is kind of one of the reasons, is that there are some really, really complicated views that we don't want to be on the hook to re-implement like right away. So yeah, we probably will eventually, is just my guess, but there aren't like sort of plans on the table to do that like right now or anything. And so I wouldn't expect it anytime soon. Let's see. Current PictureInPicture API is heavily dependent on traditional UI system of Android. Framework fires a PictureInPicture start callback, and developer is responsible for updating their UI. However, this happens at activity level. Maybe a Compose-friendly API would help with that. I see what you're saying. That's a really good question. I've never explored that API at all, actually. And you know, maybe we could do that on stream as like a dogfooding thing to see if we could get something working there. If the PictureInPicture API uses views, then I don't think you'd have any problem connecting Compose to it. If it's something more complicated than that, which I don't know, maybe it is, but then I'm not sure. We'd have to see. But that'd be a cool thing to try. Night Smear says, hey Lou, and really appreciate your streams and all your work. Thank you. Learning a lot from your videos, especially about your thought process and how to approach a problem and solve it. Yeah, appreciate it, Night. Glad you're finding them useful. Gabe says, have you any use cases in mind of a composable suspend function? Yeah, I mean, so for composable suspend, let's see. So like, you can imagine, none of this is like, so don't go like, you know, assuming this may not be what we end up with, and there's, you know, no guarantee of that. This is just something that we've, you know, started thinking about a little bit, but something that would be interesting is like, let's say you had, so here we've got your app, right? And let's say we had a, all right, so what if we had a something where we would be able to say suspendable or something. These API names are not great. And And then in here, we could say, you know, like something crazy like my data equals await, and then like, you know, some suspendable, some suspend function, right? And then we could say, you know, text my data dot results, whatever. So you could do this, and so this would be a composable suspend unit lambda. It's a bit of a mouthful, I guess. And what would happen here is that you could do this, and then so maybe suspendable would require that you did like something like this, and then you provided like a fallback API. You know, so this is like a progress indicator, something like that, right? You could do something like this maybe, and it's also possible that, for instance, we could eliminate or like alter some of the rules or for the suspend calling convention, where if you could do this at like the top level, for instance, and like let's say this was this, where here we just called A, and so A is a normal composable function, and maybe then A called B, which was actually a suspend function, and normally you wouldn't be able to do this because a suspend function wouldn't be able to call, or you wouldn't be able to call a suspend function from a non-suspend function and stuff like that. But we would maybe be able to make this work, and you could create these, you know, these things here where like basically you're saying that when you're executing this hierarchy, if something suspends instead, and then when it finishes, then do this. And there could be like at the top level of every hierarchy, the default implementation of this could just be like, okay, well, actually just run this like blocking. And so then you would have to do this, like, or this was just like an empty thing or something like that. And so then you could add these in the tree in certain places, which would then let the suspend functions propagate up into that point and that point only under this like fallback API while those suspend functions complete, or something like that. This is all theoretical at this point, and like, and you know, I've only had like 2 conversations kind of around what this would look like and how this would work, but this is something that we're starting to think about, and I wouldn't expect to see anything like this in Compose 1.0 timeframe, but it is something long term that I think is pretty interesting. So okay, let's see. Thanks for your answer. Yeah, no problem. Okay, let's go back to our tests. Looks like all of the function body skipping succeeded. So I wonder, maybe do the control flow for the defaults. mean, if this ends up passing, then I might just merge this or push this and just see if that's enough. Then I'll just have I'll have CI tell me if all the tests pass or not. And I kind of expected one of the function body skipping tests to fail, but if not, that's fine. Okay, so let's go. Just take a quick look at what we changed. Okay. That looks good. Enable intrinsic remember optimization by default. Looks good to me. All right. Cool. So one thing down. Let's see. So one issue that someone reported just the other day was a compiler issue. Let me pull this out. Yeah. So we can look at this in VS Code real quick. So basically here is supposedly a this code would produce an exception, a compile time exception. And oh, actually it's not a compile time exception, it's a runtime exception. So I think that the code that we're generating in this example is incorrect. And I think the culprit here is this early return on box, and probably the fact that box is inline. That would be my guess. So let's try and reproduce the failure first, and then once we have it failing consistently, then we'll be able to try and fix it. So I think what we want to do is do one of the Cogen tests. Think I'm trying to remember what like the typical Cogen test we have is. So we've got abstract Cogen test. Kind of thought we had different ones. All right. For some reason, so this is like a separate bug I need to fix, but for some reason these tests were flaking in the CI, so they're actually turned off right now. But let's just use this class anyway. And fixing that flakiness will just be a prerequisite to merging this. So let's just test. Well, what do we want to call this? We'll say this is an early return. Actually, let's call this a. I'm not sure if it's important, but the fact that he's using a null array return here might be. So null array return in inline composable. Sure. Aranium asks, would the new compiler's front end improve Jetpack Compose? I mean, not directly. It like the new front end should improve compile times quite a bit, so that's like obviously good. The other thing is that the new front end, because it uses like an intermediate representation, it might be a little bit more pluggable. So some of like the things that our compiler plugin is doing might be easier to do with the new front end, but not that much because most of what we do is on the back end. So I don't know. It other than the build times, it probably won't make a huge difference. Okay, so let's take the repro code. Let's put it in here. And I should just be able to call it composable. And I'll probably need to import a few of these things. So let me see what. So we import runtime.star, which is good. So I want to import box. Where's box? Box. Okay. We'll want to import modifier. And surface. I'm not seeing it, but it should be somewhere in material, I would think. Yeah, okay. So mutable state of should already be there. We probably need fill max size, yeah. Although I'm guessing that fill max size isn't important here, but let's just go with whatever the bug had as the repro. And then I don't know if we need to do anything here. Let's see if it reproduces just by composing once. Okay. Well, I don't need to set a breakpoint on that, but let's just try that. So Aranium asks, would it improve the Android Studio Compose preview? Maybe. I mean, again, it's like yes, but just really in terms of build times. So build would get faster. So that's always good. Okay, so we do have an exception. But it's not the exception that we thought. Null pointer exception. Oh, it's probably... Ah, okay. That's annoying. I wonder if I... So this test fixture is like, it's a little bit outdated at this point. And I think it's not... There's a lot of things that it's not providing in the ambience. And it should be. But it's just because I think we're... this test fixture definitely needs some revamping. Yeah, we're using... Like here I provide the ambient context, but that's it. Oh, this is gross. Gross. I think what I want to do is have this test fixture use an Android Compose view, which is not right now. Can't really see what it is using. Where does root come from? Yeah, I mean it's adding just a linear layout. Like I wonder what would happen if I just Compose view. You gonna let me do that? Oh, do we not call it Android Compose view anymore? No, we do. Oh, that's internal. Compose view is the public one. All right, I see. Okay. What about this? This is probably going to break all kinds of other tests, but let's see what happens here. So if I do this compose view, I think this will... So here's the set content method. I mean, so part of why this test fixture is so gross is like, I need to kick off a composition, but the test module that we're in right now doesn't get compiled with the compose compiler. So we have to like fabricate a compose lambda without the compose compiler's help. And it turns out that like kind of intentionally, or at least like, I think it's a good thing, but in this case it's hard, is it's really hard to call a composable function if you don't have the compose compiler like available. But anyway, I think that what we can do is instead of, so I have the set content method. And so I want to invoke it with the root. So root, right? And then I'm going to pass it real composable, which I shouldn't need to do this anymore. I think it'll do that for me. And then I can just pass it this one, I think. Let's see how that works. That'll be kind of interesting. Oh, but then I need the composition. Let me see. So set content. Is it, is there any way for me to get the composition out of this thing? Okay, here's the composition. I suppose I can just get it with reflection if I need to, but suppose. Although let's see, why do I need the composition? I don't actually. So great, even better. And then I shouldn't need any of these. Set content should be accessible. So I can get rid of that. Oh, wait, I removed too much here. Okay. Okay, I think this might do it. Let's give it a shot. I mean, honestly, this would be a good change. I just removed a lot of gross implementation details of our test infrastructure. So that'd be good. Interesting. Okay, so this passed, which I mean, so what that tells us is it's like this gave us I mean, this all compiled and it composed once. So that's good. Let's see, what else am I gonna do here? All right, let's add to this test a little bit. Column, and then this is kind of silly, but it'll work, I guess. Okay, so let's say we've got a inc by number interval state of 0, and then it's fine. We're just gonna print that, and I'm gonna have this button two, three, text equals inc. So this isn't the normal Compose UI button, and with this like test fixture the way it is right now, we kind of only have this is testing Compose without the Compose test utilities. So we're kind of like limited with like find view by ID and stuff, and we're actually composing actual views into the hierarchy here. So it's a little bit weird. So let's see if this works. I'm honestly not sure that it will. And what this should do is it should, I mean, this will end up just causing this to recompose, which that's what I want. Is I guess what I'm trying to, this bug said that this failed 100% of the time, but I'm wondering if it only failed on recomposition. And so this will just cause it to recompose. And so then we come here. All right, let's see if this works. And then I'm probably going to be missing, let's see, column is probably missing, yeah. So add that in there. Born in Bronx says, shouldn't you run all of the other tests to see if your change actually does the composition? Yeah, that's probably a pretty good idea. I think that change probably broke a lot of the tests for other reasons, so that was one of the reasons I was avoiding it. But we can check. Okay, composable invocations can only happen inside of composition. I wonder where that's coming from. Remember. I'm not sure why I would get that exception. This is happening at compile time. So something I just added appears to be making it think that we're composing, or we're calling a composable function from a non-composable function. Okay. Let's try born in Bronx idea. Let's just run this test and see if it this one looks pretty innocent, so I think that this would succeed in both cases. Okay. All right. So it can't find the text view, which might make sense. So I actually don't know. All right, I think that the change I made is gonna be, I think doing this change correctly is gonna take some more time. I think what I'll do yeah, let's just revert this here. Oops. We really should make that change down the road, but I guess like I'll save that for another stream. Like I don't want to dive into that right now. So what I'm wondering is if I'm not sure surface is needed here. Let's do this. Like I wonder if I just try and replicate the bug by making something that's kind of like surface and kind of like box, then I think I might be able to do it. So let's just assume we've got something like this. Let's get rid of these. And let's make a composable font box and a composable font surface. So surface isn't, it's not inline. So it's just gonna have a composable unit lambda here. And let's see if just calling content here is good enough. And then box is inlined, I think. So let me verify that. Yes. Okay. Let's do the same thing here. And so really we've dramatically simplified the example but I think that it's possible that this issue is like easier to produce than that. So let's find out. Born in Bronx says, how do you revert a single line to previous version? Looks like an IDE feature I didn't know about. Yeah, I don't know what you can see on stream. So in Android Studio, at least for me, if you make it aware of Git, in the gutter here, it'll show like changes. So like this arrow means that something was deleted. And then this green means that it was something that was added. And then you're able to, like if you hover over this, like so this rolls it back. And then if it's a line that's changed, so like that, what you can do here is when you click the gutter, it'll show you the previous version. And so then I'll just hit roll back. It is a nice feature. I do rely on it a fair amount. So okay, so TV's null in this case, which makes sense. And so let's at least like let's do what I was gonna do before, where I'm gonna create a button that will help us recompose this area, just to see if it happens on recomposition. And var inc by remember state of 0. Okay, so now let's try that. All right. So that succeeded. So, all right. I think to avoid for the moment rewriting the test fixture in the compiler test, I'm thinking I might just write a test and an integration test that's outside of the runtime real quick and just see if we can. I just want to validate that the current version of the compiler actually produces this issue, because this issue is reported in Alpha 7, but there have been a few compiler changes that might actually have accidentally fixed this or something. And so I want to at least see the issue with my own two eyes. So let's just go to material. We'll get some integration tests. Or actually, we don't need the material integration tests. We can just use material tests. So I'm gonna just cherry pick on a checkbox UI test here. Let's do this. And so this is a temporary compiler bug test, right? And let's throw that in there. And then we'll just add a test tag here. I mean, that's unlikely to change anything. Or I guess following the conventions here, I'll use default tag. Assert exists. Didn't exist. I mean, that should work. We'll see if this succeeds. Then maybe the reporter meant to, or like didn't indicate that the that recomposing was sort of required here to produce this bug. And then if this doesn't reproduce with if this doesn't reproduce even after recomposition, then I'm not sure what to do. I might just ask the reporter to, see if it's fixed on master for them or something like that. I could also just take a look at the raw compiler output of like this example and just see if anything looked off to me. One of the difficulties, I guess, is that sometimes you get these like slot table imbalance errors, and you can generate code that is technically wrong, but the runtime won't actually catch that it's wrong, because the slot table will continue to be well formed, even though the generated code is technically generated in a way where you could write code that causes an imbalance. And so sometimes it's hard to reproduce these issues because they're giving users an exception at runtime, but that's only happening because of the entire context of everything that's happening in the slot table around them. And so reducing it down to a simple repro is difficult. But in this case, even though this is a 4-line repro, surface and box here are not simple. And so that surface and box might have some combination of things where this ends up producing a slot table imbalance, whereas the simple example that I just did in the compiler test didn't, because it was just I wasn't doing anything other than just calling the lambda. So okay, so this test succeeded. The next thing we should do is just try and the next thing we should do is just try and get it to recompose, I guess. So to do that, let's just say curious what this ends up using. Material theme surface. Yep, kind of annoyed, but okay. So let's just put a column here. Actually, here, let's do this. Why would... Is composable really not imported in this file? Wow, interesting. Okay, so let's just make a mutable state of 0. And I'm gonna cause that to recompose. See what that does. Okay, and then so then let's have this do that. So let's just say inc ++, and then await idle. Is this okay? What? Oh. There we go. What is this complaining about now? Oh. All right. Get value and set value. Oh, I guess what I want to do is this. And then I'll just do this again. Okay. And let's see how that works. Well, oh, you know what? I'm using this. This is gonna be kind of ridiculous if that's what caused it, but what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna okay. Let's just do this. Oh no, because it's still looking at that. All right. So let me explain the thought process in my head. Is so the fact that, let me just pull it back here. The fact that this method was using that, well, so okay, so a few things. One is local composable functions like this end up not being skipped. So the code that we generate is different. And so that was why I was thinking, okay, I'll put this up here. But it turns out that that's like also not quite enough, because it's using this test class default tag, and so then that's turning this function into an unskippable function, and you know, all this stuff. So what I want to do instead, I guess, is let's just add a I'm changing the code that this user said reproduce this, but it's probably, you know, okay. So what I'm gonna do is then on click inc ++, and we need to give this a modifier, test tag button, and then let's just I'm just gonna do this type thing here, hello world, whatever, and then I'm gonna move this in here. Well, actually, so what I'm gonna do is just take this out of that function. Maybe. Let's just go to the top level here. Let's composable bugged composable. So what this will do is this will subscribe this to this state object, and then this is gonna call it, right? Or mutate it, so then it causes it to recompose. So let's just give that. Let's find the button. Well, okay, so first let's find the box, and then assert exists. That's good. And then let's find the button, and then let's say, okay, we'll assert exists, and then we'll say click, perform click. Okay. So, and then what I'll do is we'll again check to see that the box is there. Okay, let's give that a shot. Okay. Well, looks like that succeeded. Shouldn't change anything. So I kind of just want to, let's just say, So this should be 0, and then we perform clicks. Just want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly. 6 equals 1, okay. This is probably me just writing the test wrong. Or actually, so this not. I think I might be. Hello. So it doesn't look like it's recomposing. And that might just be lack of understanding on my part around this test fixture. But like, let me just try that. I'm not sure if that's needed or not. I didn't think that it was, but maybe it is. Nope, same issue. Did I just do something silly with, oh, I'm creating a new state here. Well, that would do it. Okay, so that was silly. I didn't need that the first time because it was outside of the composable, but then I moved it in. So I don't think that I need this. Let's just, so this should pass. Well, I think it'll pass because it seems to be working otherwise. And I can't seem to reproduce this bug. So if I can't reproduce this here, I'm probably just gonna move on and let the okay, let's try that. If I can't reproduce it, then, well, if I convince myself that this test is running and it's going through a recomposition and everything, I'm probably just gonna give the feedback to the bug reporter that, you know, this may be fixed on master, like see if they can test it there or something, because I haven't been able to reproduce it. But I guess now I don't know, because it's it's not really, doesn't seem to be updating, so I'm not sure what. Shouldn't even really be needed, but so I seem to be missing something. Not. I mean, sure. Okay, so let's. Like, I'm not sure this. We can put the content in here, and then like let's. I guess let's just. You know, I'm not sure if this Fluent API is like doing some special stuff that I need to do it all in one go. I'm not sure. So what do we have left? We've got the I'm gonna forget the box. Let's just work on the button. Okay, after this, text should equal 1, and that's it. So let's see if that works. I don't really need that either. Oh, well this won't work because it's returning. Which that makes sense. So this isn't gonna exist. Node cannot be found. Sure. All right. I guess. Well, let's try putting it here. I mean, that might change enough to where this repro doesn't even work anymore, but I'm not sure. What is I'm not sure why it thinks that's wrong. Okay, finally. So this is working now. I'm a little bit concerned about the apparent requirement of this API. Or, I mean, I just want to verify this for my own sanity. Will this still work? I mean, I would expect that it does, but I just want to make sure that this is how our test API works. Or else I feel like that's a problem. Okay. Not sure what else to do with this. I think I could do this. This might... Like... I don't know. This might do something a little bit different, but... I think I'm gonna have to call this not reproducible. Yeah. Okay. That is fine. I will I'll update that bug later. And we'll just move on from that. So let's see, what are some other bugs that I have? So I've got some API review bugs. What this means is that there's, let me just go ahead and undo my local changes here a bit. Get reset. Okay. Cool. So this would be like a little bit different for some people. What this is, or like for my stream, I'm often working in the compiler, but this will be some API updates to the runtime. And in this case, there is a, let's see, an updater class. Let me try and find it. Class updater. Right. Okay. So this class it's kind of used for so let's see, there's an emit function. This is public API. This is like one of the kind of fundamental APIs of Compose. So this is how the actual nodes of the tree in Compose are like emitted into the tree. And it's kind of like a sort of handcrafted composable function, if you will. And so it uses this updater class. Eventually this class is going to change where the node won't be, you won't have to pass in the node in order to create one of these. It'll be sort of like a lazy kind of thing. But that's not what we're worried about right now. Basically this class is public API and it probably doesn't need to be. So the signature of emit has updater in it, which means the class itself has to be public, but we don't necessarily have to make the constructor public. However, we're using it in an inline function and the constructor is used in the inline function. So probably the best we can do here is making the constructor internal and published API. which is still better than having it public. If it's something that we don't really want users relying on or like using, and like we maybe want to change it over time, like we can do that with less pain if like it's just source compatible, because users aren't writing actual calls to this. It's only through the inline function that they're ending up using it. So let's mark that published API, which I think we can do. And we'll do that. So that shouldn't complain. And so that works, I think. Okay, so that's part of it. And then there's also a skippable updater. Where is that? So this is like a similar or like analogous class, and we'll do the same thing here. Push API internal. Okay. So let's see, what else can we do? I think we can also make the Composer and Node internal published API. Which, I mean, this whole class then, it's like it feels a little bit wrong because this whole class has kind of got all these internal published APIs roaming around, but it's still probably better because I don't want, we don't want people using the Composer and the Node directly. And it's not the intention of this surface area, this API. And the reason that we're like, I think the typical solution to this would be just make this an interface and then expose, like an implementation to an interface, and then expose whatever we want in the interface. But in this case, we're like kind of relying on the inlining of these functions for like pretty critical reasons in some cases. And so because of that, it needs to be a concrete class. It can't be an interface, or else then it can't be inline. So that's kind of the background here, I guess. So let's go ahead and do the same thing here. We'll make that publish API internal. Plier. What is this yelling about? Oh. Okay, well that, my IDE is incorrect about those issues. So these are our changes, and I suspect everything, I suspect all the tests and everything should just be working. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to wrap that change up in a commit. Well, actually, so there's a command here. So we track our public API in like these API tracking files using a tool called MetaLava. And so I changed something that's part of the public API. And so I'm going to have to run this tool to update that API. And I don't want to do it for the whole project because that's going to take a long time. Compose runtime, and I think I can just do it for that, which will go quicker, and I think that'll work. So let's see. So Oscar Zito says, "Hey Leland, hope your Friday's awesome. What's your take/recommendation on working with view models in Compose? When playing around with Compose, I've found myself way too many times creating more and more callback parameters in my composables that I then pass to child composables, when in fact it would be much easier to just pass the view model. I'm not super happy with that solution, but I don't really know best practices here. I feel like this was much easier to solve with fragments." Yeah, so it's hard to say without like looking at your code exactly, but from what it sounds like is you have some view model, and let me see, creating more and more callback parameters in my composables that I then pass to child composables. I see. So are you using a view model but just at like the top level, or and then you're using these callback parameters, and then and the callback has like it's captured the view model, and then you're doing something in that callback? Or are you avoiding view models altogether right now, and when you're doing that, you've just noticed that you've naturally started creating a lot of callback parameters that you're then passing around the callbacks to, and then that feels yucky to you? Is that like which of those situations, I guess, are you in? Okay, so this update API got finished here, and so we've got these files, and we're gonna package this up in a commit. What will we call that commit? So let's see, move updater APIs to internal published APIs where possible. All right. And then this has a bug associated with it, so I'm going to grab that. And that's it. Oh, and then actually, related to this, so we have a MIT here. And the skippable updater emit was added, but without it was added without any documentation on it. So let's copy over this documentation. Let me see. So this is the one with update and content. Update and content. Okay. So let's add this documentation and let's read it a little bit. Emits a node into the composition of type T. Nodes emitted inside of content will become children of the emitted node. That all still makes sense. The only difference here is that we now have a skippable update. So let's just add that. And trying to remember what the contract of skippable update was like. So you don't see this here, but okay. So the idea here is that the lambda, the skippable updater lambda it'll skip. It'll only run it again if there was an invalidation in that region. That right? Yeah, okay, because it's a composable lambda. I see. Okay. Yep. All right. So so this is a function to perform updates on the node. This will let's say unlike update, this function will be skipped unless it is invalidated. This function is composable and will thus or be skipped unless it has been invalidated by some other mechanism. This is can be useful to perform expensive calculations or updating the node where the calculations are likely to have the same inputs over time, so the function's execution can be skipped. Okay. Sure. So let me put in skippable updater. And so this is decent enough documentation, I guess, for this function. And I'm just going to add that onto this commit here. Okay, and that should be good. So that should be enough for that bug. Let's go back and see what Born in Bronx says here. Born in Bronx says, you probably already answered this in the stream, but I couldn't yet see all of it. The contention for fun is to have the first letter as lowercase, but with Compose I see capital cases used. Is there a rationale behind it? Another convention I've seen with Compose is to use upper level function. Why not encapsulate them into a class instead, or even use an interface and implementation in some cases, or maybe just an object to avoid conflicting names? Is there a rationale behind that too? Yeah, so these are good questions. I'm not sure if I've covered them directly in the stream or not, but we can certainly spend a minute talking about it. let's go here. So the first question is around the casing convention for composable functions. Indeed, this has been a topic of controversy and one that we've talked about a lot. So the kind of the underlying justification for this is that we want people to think of composable functions as nouns. They're things that are on the screen. They're like living things, and instead of thinking of them as verbs. And there was a time where we actually moved to lowercase, like the normal Kotlin casing conventions. And it was interesting that there was a mental shift in people's heads, and they started writing all these composables that had verb names, and it was something that we didn't like. And so we kind of reverted that, and we've sort of tried to hold our ground on this so far. And so, this ends up being like, we've got column, text, hello, button, text, button, whatever, image, stuff like that. And so then this has a feeling maybe of like, these things being something. But it's all just, it's very subjective. And so, we could also have something like this. And this is like also something that you could do. There are some like lingering kind of second order effects here that can be a little bit weird. Is like if you use the lowercase, then you end up having a lot of naming conflicts with like things that you have locally. So like you might have a variable named text locally, and so then it's a little bit weird when you might write something like this, and even though Kotlin actually allows this because it has different namespacing for functions and variables, but it starts looking a little bit weird in that way as well. One of the things that so this isn't for all composable functions. Like if you'll notice, we have some composable functions like remember, which are lowercase, and the sort of, we wanted to come up with a rule here that was easy to validate and easy to remember, right? No pun intended. And basically what we came up with is, if it's interesting because it's almost the opposite of what the rule is for normal functions. But basically the idea is that if it's a normal function, then you should use lowercase unless it's a constructor, right? For composable functions, we basically said that you should use uppercase anytime the return type is unit. And so anytime the return type is non-unit, then you would use something else, or you would use the lowercase convention. And that's nice because it's really easy to implement like that, like validation. Like you don't have to have like understanding of implementation details or anything like that. It's inferable from the public signature. Anyway, that's just kind of where we landed. Might be controversial, but I don't know. I think this is a little bit. It evokes the right cognitive like response for me, but again, that's like very subjective. So the second question was, Oh, top level functions versus class functions. So I guess it should be said at least that it's fine to do both. Like there's no language level like reason to do one or the other. So like you could just say, you know, like you could have a, you know, widgets sort of thing, and you know you could have you know, checkbox or something, and you could do something like this, and then you know in here you could you know, you can refer to these as like widgets.checkbox, and like, and all that just works. Like it's all the same like language rules apply for where these functions can be. They can be on objects, they can be on classes, they can be on interfaces, like, you know, all of that. But there are some this one more so than the first question. There's a lot of good reasons to not put them on objects like this. So one is that composable functions you kind of want to think of as like pure functions. Like they're just static functions where they take in some inputs and they produce an output. And so having them as top level kind of makes that easier. What happens is that when, like, so, you know, this composable function, let's just call it A, it has some number of parameters, right? You know, whatever. And the underlying principle that Compose takes advantage of is that if you call A with the same parameters, then the expectation is that the thing that A is producing isn't going to change. And Compose really takes advantage of that fact, and in a lot of cases will actually just skip the execution of A if the inputs haven't changed. And if you put something on B here, there, like, let's say this is a class, right? You know, foo, whatever. This might have some parameters on it, but there's like a third silent parameter here, which is the class itself. It's like the this parameter to this function. And when Compose is doing its optimizations, it must factor in the this parameter when determining whether or not the value has changed, and or whether or not the function could have changed. Because, like, for instance, I could have, you know, I could have something like this. So let's say I could do this. And so here, what if I, or sorry, okay. So let's say I have a val foo equals, let's put this in the constructor, right? Oops. So now I can say foo.b, x and y, but let's say I pass in z here. So maybe z is the only thing that changed, but x and y didn't. In this case, I can't skip b because foo is different now, and so I like Compose has to factor, like, use foo to factor in whether or not it's skippable. And like before we had stable inference, that meant like most classes which would be not marked as stable, like just immediately removed the ability for this function to skip. Now we do something, we do, even before stable inference, we started doing something a little bit smarter, which is that we actually analyzed the body of the function. And so like this would be skippable. Like let's just say I did, you know, X, Y, whatever. But if I did this would not be skippable, because what we would do is we would actually analyze the body of the function, and if it ever used this parameter in it, right? Because this is sort of short for this dot c. So if it ever used this, then it would kind of remove the skippability of this thing. But we made it so that it only does that if it uses this parameter. And so there are some things that are useful for making this a top level concept. But in addition to that, it you know, if it can be made top level, it probably should, because that it's an indication that it doesn't have these other dependencies, and I think that that's a valuable like indication to make. So anyway, hopefully that maybe explains it there. All right, so a few more questions here. Okay, so Oscar Zito, who's asking about view models, says, maybe I'm stuck in old habits, but I'm trying to make some sort of single activity application. At the moment, my view model is injected into the activity. That activity also sets its content to composable called main screen. Let's imagine that main screen is a lot of nested composable. For instance, like a custom column with a custom row with another custom column, etc. That then has two buttons. What would be a good way to set click listeners to those buttons that calls a function in a view model? Yeah, so maybe it would like maybe be good for me to look at the actual code that you're working with, but it might what's happening here might be something that I actually talked directly about in a YouTube video. So there's a talk that I gave called Thinking and Compose, and there's a whole section on this where really I think what a lot of people miss at first is that the power of providing a content lambda in some of your composables, and I'm not going to spend a ton of time explaining why right now. Like I think because I think I do a better job of it in the video, and so if this is it, maybe you should go watch the video. But in general, what you're asking about, I mean, I think that what you're doing, what it sounds like you're doing with like having, you know, some view model, and then you're calling methods on that view model in some event lambda or something, that sounds very reasonable to me. And listen, I mean, I think it's a little bit dangerous, like when people start saying like, oh, like don't do this, do this instead, or this is like an indie pattern. Like I think you should like play around with it. So watch that video and let me know if that kind of helped you out or not. But if it doesn't, I mean, if like you want to just kind of pass this view model down into your composables and you find that easier, like that's not the worst thing in the world, right? Like that's all valid code to write. And you know, maybe someone you know, said it's like I would feel like maybe a little bit bad about like writing code that did that, and like it like probably wouldn't be like what I would do, but that's okay. Like I guess the point is like, you know, do what feels good to you, I guess. And if if writing these lambdas or something feels complicated or verbose, and like you'd rather just pass the view model around, then like you should totally just do that. And see where it gets you, right? Just like always keep it in the back of your head as like, okay, well, maybe I should do something different. Like maybe this view model is doing too much. Maybe I should split it up into different pieces of data that I pass down instead, or I should start centralizing some of this logic in something that is sort of embodied by a single composable, but then the UI concerns in that composable are factored out and kept elsewhere, and like things like this. Like it is a different way of thinking, and so there's different things that can be done. But if something doesn't feel good, don't take everything as Bible, right? So play around with it. And feel free to shoot me over some code or a gist or something if you feel like there's like something you're missing or you think there's a better way. I'm happy to take a look at it. Let's see. Ursus says, I always wanted to ask, why is suspend a keyword in composable and annotation? Feels second-class citizen-y, or rather, why is suspend special when it's essentially the same thing? Marker for a compiler plugin. So Ursus, I mean, in like a really real way, composable is a second-class citizen. I wish it wasn't, but it is. Suspend is not part of a compiler plugin. It's part of the Kotlin compiler and part of the Kotlin language. And so the meaning of suspend is part of the Kotlin language specification. And I mean, it wouldn't need to be a keyword. You could have an annotation that was part of the Kotlin language specification, but because it's part of the Kotlin language specification, it seemed reasonable to make it like a first class sort of function modifier keyword. It operates on the language in almost exactly the same way that composable does. Like the two are very similar, and I often use that as an analogy. But composable is something that was invented by us, by Google. It was invented outside of the Kotlin language as a third-party sort of thing, and so we have a compiler plugin that essentially augments the Kotlin language. And someday, potentially the meaning of composable could be part of the Kotlin language. It's not right now, but it totally could be. And I would absolutely love that. Like, I think that would be a big achievement for me personally. Like, I would be really happy about that. It's probably not ready yet. I mean, languages are very, very permanent things, and so it's good that we can iterate on compose and the meaning of composable kind of out in user space, and then in the future, once we have a really confident sort of feeling of like, okay, this is what composable means, and that's becoming more and more confident every day. At that point in time, then maybe we say, okay, let's think about or propose adding this to the Kotlin language. And then maybe at that point, a keyword or something would be reasonable. But it would also be okay for it to live as an annotation. Like, again, annotations are a part of the Kotlin language, and there can be some annotations that do special compiler things that, like an annotation would be okay as the end state for composable. But I do think it would look a lot cleaner if it was like a soft keyword or something. So that'd be great. Okay, so Born in Bronx says there is probably a third hidden question about how to handle name clashes between library's top-level function. Import and namespace helps, I suppose, and the keyword as for conflict could probably be used. Thanks for your answer again, by the way. Hope I'm not asking too much. So first of all, you're definitely not asking too much. I love it when people ask questions, and it's you know, one of the reasons I like doing these streams is because it helps show me what people are curious about, and I think it also gets you know, valuable information out to others, because if you're wondering about it, other people probably are as well. So as far as like namespace collision prevention and stuff like that, yeah, it's I mean, I think the same mechanisms that you avoid clashes with anything else in a language, but I agree that putting, you know, promoting the use of top level functions might make that a little bit more of a problem. But you know, remember that you can import packages, and then you know, you can prefix the function call with the sub package, and you know, Kotlin has various utilities to kind of wrangle this and make it more manageable. But you know, also maybe be thoughtful, as we certainly should be as well, of like the you know, the name that you're using and what package you're putting it in, and stuff like that. So yeah, those are my thoughts. Oscar Zito says, I've seen Thinking in Compose, it's really great. You just gave a perfectly comforting answer to a Compose newbie question. I got like 100 more questions, but I wouldn't want to take up too much of your time with those. Thank you. Yeah, no problem, Oscar Zito, and don't be afraid to, you know, ask more questions. Like I said, I enjoy it. Warren Bronx says, a Kotlin 1.4 online event. They also explain that they want to make the compiler extension features Google's using to build Compose to the public, but they are not ready yet. Yeah, so Kotlin's doing there's like a symbol processors thing that they're working on in collaboration with us to I think kind of basically do a lot of what annotation processors do right now, but in a much better way, I think, for the ecosystem. And so those are really great. It's unclear if Compose could ever be built with that. But if it could, we would definitely consider using such a thing as a sort of more stable and sanctioned way to accomplish what we're doing. Okay, let's see. All right, let's go to another bug. There's a few APIs that we need to remove. Let's see. One of them is reference queue. So I think observer map and reference queue are like things that we're not actually using. So like they were related to how we implemented the state system before, but we removed all of that. And so I don't think they're needed anymore, but I just forgot to remove them. Yeah, so reference queue is used in observer map, weak reference, and identity weak reference. So let's see, is weak reference still used? Okay, so weak reference is not used anywhere. And then identity weak reference is used in observer map, which we're gonna get rid of. Okay. And then to verify observer map, this I believe should also not be used. So it's used in tests, which is fine. Okay, so great. So I think we can get rid of just like all of this, which is gonna be awesome. So let's delete the observer map file, which is apparently difficult to find. Observer map, let's just delete that. Delete. Okay, and then so now we can get rid of weak reference. Okay, so we can get rid of that. And reference queue as well. Okay, so there's no usage of reference. Okay, so we'll get rid of that. Oops. And Andre says, yes, delete that, please. Yep, that'll make it a little bit easier to have the runtime work in JavaScript. So let's see, do we still use weak hash map? Okay, no usages of weak hash map. Excellent. Let me just make sure. Okay, so we do use this here. Okay. Yeah, we should evaluate whether or not there's a better way to do this. All right, so I can't get rid of weak hash map. That one needs to stay. Let's see. Atomic reference is used. Okay. I think that should be good. Oh, I need to get rid of the tests, I guess. These things, let's see. Where are the observer map tests? So that will be deleted. Okay. I think that's all we really need to do. So let's go over here. And so then we want to run the same thing here. Then we'll merge that. crazy. It's like it's 5:45 and it's like pitch black outside. It's just craziness. Like I feel like I'm like burning the midnight oil here. Like it's like dark in this room, and I don't know. I'm like here on my computer. Like you could tell me it's like midnight, and I'd be like, oh my gosh, how did I work for that long? But it's just 5:45. It's like still the workday. Actually, let me turn on this lamp real quick. Hold on one second. I'll be right back. All right, I'm back. Shoot, hold on one second. Okay. All right, I'm back. I'm just looking up something real quick. It's funny, this Airbnb that we're staying in, there's like a gate for behind the front door that you need a key to unlock, but there's only one key, and so like if one person leaves and has the key, then the other person's just like trapped inside. It's a bad setup. Okay. Hold on one second. All right, sorry. So what were we working on? Right, okay, so here we've got the API files updated. So I'm gonna add those and wrap them up in a commit. And I've got a few bug IDs for this. Well, here, let's type a message first. So remove unused classes left over from frames implementation, or framed implementation. Okay. And then this has 2 bugs, I think. Got this one. And this one. Okay. That. All right, and then I think we're gonna let's do one more API bug that a little more involved, but it shouldn't be too crazy here. So so we have these there's these like experimental annotations, right? So Kotlin has this like requires opt-in feature, which you can apply to an annotation, which then requires you to like opt in if you end up using that API anywhere. We're using it for a few things, and one of the things that we're using it for is Compose Compiler API. And I think this is a really good usage of it because basically there's a set of APIs that the Compose Compiler is meant to directly call, but you're really not. It would be weird for like users to use these APIs directly, right? And so these are great APIs that like they have to be public. They're part of our public API because the compiler targets them, and so they have to be there. But we don't really want people writing code that targets them, and so I think this is like a reasonable usage of this annotation. However, I think that there are a few that are kind of out of date, and like the compiler doesn't actually use them anymore, and so we can kind of get rid of them at this point. Max Parker says, hi, what would you say is the biggest limitation with Compose versus regular XML? Any fears when it comes to releasing it to developers around the world? Do you also happen to have any insights into when I can make use of my favorite transition, material container transform in Compose? Haha. Okay, so a few questions. Let me answer this. So the first question is, what would you say is the biggest limitation with Compose versus regular XML? I don't know. I mean, there's like, I guess it depends what you mean. Are you like directly asking about like XML, or do you just mean versus the like the current Android view system? Because I think the answers would be kind of different. Like I think for XML, you know, there's trade-offs, right? Like XML is completely static, and so writing tools to interpret that XML is a lot easier. And Compose code is it's declarative in a sense, which, you know, XML is obviously declarative. Like that's very declarative. It's just static, and so you just declare it. But Compose is kind of this, like, you know, it's more in the middle of the spectrum where it's declarative because you basically you say what you want. But it's very dynamic because we're using a programming language to allow for dynamicism and control flow and all these things. And so that makes it harder for tools to interpret it. Essentially, you need a full-on compiler to interpret it, right? Whereas, you know, you could write an XML parser without that much effort. But at the same time, that dynamicism is like kind of the whole point. Like that's where the power of Compose comes in. And so there's you don't run into a ceiling with Compose whenever you want to do something dynamically, whereas with XML you do. And then the way to do that is to write some, you know, Kotlin or Java code that goes and pokes at that XML or that view hierarchy, but at runtime. And so there's trade-offs, but I think that the trade-offs that Compose makes are the right ones. Next question is, any fears when it comes to releasing it to developers around the world? Yeah, sure. I mean, I think my biggest fear is just that like API regret, right? I think that when you're talking about something like Compose that is dependent upon as much as Compose is, once we hit like a stable 1.0 landmark, like it's going to be very difficult to kind of walk APIs back, right? Like we have a strong sort of like SLA for binary compatibility that we follow, and that means that mistakes that we make now that we don't realize are mistakes yet will probably be living with us for a long time, and so that, you know, that scares me. But you know, we have been iterating on things for quite a while, so you know, we're trying to do as best we can. Do you also happen to have any insights into when I can make use of my favorite transition, material, container transform? Unfortunately, I don't actually know what that is, so I can't really say when you can use it. But you know, if you're wondering, like, you should maybe file a feature request bug and you know, just say like, here's my use case, here's what I want to do, like when can I do this? And I'm sure someone that's more knowledgeable than me can answer. So anyway, hope that helps. So back to the what I was working on. We have these Compose compiler API annotations, and they indicate APIs that the compiler actually calls. And I want to do like a bit of a cleanup because I think that they're annotating some APIs that the compiler doesn't actually call anymore. And one of them, so I saw this at one point, and so I don't think that we actually use start node and stuff like that in the compiler anymore. So I think that we can get rid of these, but let's try and verify that. So comp function body transform. So, or actually, there's a better one. It's like well, okay. So let's see. Start node. Not here. FQ names. So there are like a lot of the APIs that we actually call, we try to move over into this file here. So you can kind of see, you know, these are some of the things that we use. Yeah. So I don't think we use it anymore. It's not in here. We can, let's just do like a search for start node here. A lot of stuff in tests, but there's nothing in the actual compiler. So yeah. So basically we can get rid of this. And I think that we can mark this as internal because it's used in emit, which is fine. And that's it. So let's make this internal. Start node, and I think it's the same for create node. There's actually might be no usages of this. Okay, there are some. Apply start node, use node. Great. So this is no longer a compiler API, and let's make it internal. I'm sorry, hold on 1 second again. All right, I'm back. Sorry about that. Okay, so we're looking at create node. Create node we also made internal. And then emit node I think is the same. It's used in emit. Okay. So I think we can cut that out and then make that internal. Then use node I believe is the same. Yep. Right. And end node will probably be the last node related API. So all of these node functions, we used to use the compiler in order to emit nodes, and then we just ended up making this emit function a public API, and then that was it. But okay, so some of these we're gonna have to make internal published API. So we'll do that. And then emit node, use node. All right. So and end node. All right, but that at least, like, because so there's still published API because of the emit API is inline, but it's at least better that users won't find these APIs and call them themselves or anything like that. So that's good. And then the next thing I want to do. All right, so let's go over just all of Composer here and find all of the, let's just collapse all. And let's just find all of the Compose compiler APIs and open that in a find window here. All right. So add recompose scope. So first of all, this is private, so I don't think we need to mark any of these things. If it's not public, then it doesn't matter what we mark it as. So we can just remove those. It's no big deal. Same with ambient scope at. Build reference, I think it's the same thing. It's internal, so it doesn't doesn't matter. Cache. So cache is a compiler API. So we may generate calls directly to cache. That is true. All of these changed calls are methods that we may call. I don't think that we use the applier though. Yeah, we don't use the applier on anything. So this is probably not. I mean, I think at one point we were thinking of the compiler API as like the Compose compiler API annotation as, hey, just don't worry about this. Don't use it. But here I think we want to use it directly as something that the compiler will synthesize calls to this method, and that's like it. So I don't think we want to use it here, but we might want to make this internal if we can. So emit uses it, which I understand. Composition tests, so that's fine. Yeah, so I think this being internal published API, I think makes some sense. So let's do that. Published API internal. Okay. I think that is valid here. Yep. All right, so then we'll go back to our find compiler API. Oops. All right. Ursa says, by the way, is compose main thread only, or are handler.posts still necessary? This view models needing to have the main thread dispatcher schedule or injected. Kind of a nuanced question. So right now, composition and like most everything compose happens on a single thread, usually the main thread. However, that's not the plan. We're working really hard to get composition to happen on a separate thread, and that'll probably happen before 1.0. And a lot of the things that we're like pushing you to do are sort of in preparation for that. However, if you're calling like a view model method or something like that, you're probably not calling that in composition. You're probably calling it in like an event callback, like some, on click handler or something like that. And those should be executed on the main thread. And so you should be safe to do that in most places. So hopefully that answers your question. Max Parker says, when creating a big project like Compose from scratch, how many developers are involved in a process like that? How do you assure that everything works as expected when there are many chefs in the kitchen? Unexpected bugs must occur at some point, right? Yeah, that's a great question. So, I mean, one, these things they usually kind of grow organically, right? And so it might start off with just a few people and then grow to many. And that was, kind of the case with Compose. Like, from my point of view in the project, we sort of started out, and we started out as just, basically 2 or 3 of us working on the Kotlin compiler on, sort of this new zany idea or whatever. And eventually we kind of combined efforts with, very like close colleagues of ours that were working on the sort of the next UI toolkit kind of thing. And then, and like we ended up deciding that like the stuff that we were working on, which is like this declarative runtime, ended up aligning very closely with the goals of what the next UI toolkit ought to look like. And so then we started working closely together, and at some point we like that meant that like the crazy zany stuff with the Kotlin compiler that we were working on needed to move over into the code base where they were building a new UI toolkit, and those kind of became the same thing. But it was really difficult for a while, because this is like, there were a lot of unstable things that we were talking about. So one, there's a team building a new UI toolkit from scratch. They're building it on top of a runtime that was, untested. Like, well, I mean, we had tests, but like it was not battle tested, right? It was being worked on. And that runtime targeted a compiler plugin, which was also being worked on. And that compiler plugin relied on a backend of the Kotlin compiler that was also being worked on. And so it's sort of like we were we were building a house of cards on top of a house of cards, and which was, then being built on top of a house of cards. Like it was, for a little while. I mean, there was some very difficult periods where like we had to be very careful about what we changed, because we weren't, like we had a lot of people relying on things kind of working when in reality they were shifting from under us, and so it was really difficult. And it was really easy for people's trust. Like whenever you're working on a compiler, like normally a compiler is like the one thing that you can kind of rely on. Like if something's not working, it's like, okay, well, I must have written the code wrong or something, because like it's not the compiler that's wrong. But when you're working on like these kind of in progress compilers, like whenever something doesn't work, you're like, wait, maybe the code I wrote is fine, but the compiler is wrong. And it was tough, because we kind of eroded people's trust. And so for a long time, whenever something would happen, like whenever something wasn't working, it was really easy for it was really difficult for anyone to really understand where the problem was coming from. And so I think I ended up being kind of one of the people that was like able to figure out maybe from like a given bug report. It's like, okay, this is probably a runtime bug. Okay, this is probably an IR compiler bug. Or like, okay, this is probably the compose compiler bug. And like it was really difficult, because like it's frustrating, because you wouldn't know what was causing the problems. And so we're a long way away from that now, but it took a lot of time to build up to that. And like definitely in projects like this, testing a lot is very important. Being careful, and like if something isn't very well tested, like taking the extra time to do that, or having some measures in place to like quickly undo some change that you made or something like that. But yeah, it's hard. Okay, so Born Brock says it's really tired at 3 a.m. here. Yeah, go to bed. Thanks for tuning in. I appreciate it. You had some good questions, and I'm glad it was useful. Shadowcast TV says, the current project I'm working on started with just me 1.5 years ago. Currently in the hiring process for a second dev. Sometimes there are not enough chefs in the kitchen. Yeah. Going from 1 to 2, that's a big difference, right? Like once you have 2 people, then all of a sudden it's like you have to explain how code works to someone. And then it's like going from 2 to 10 and 10 to 100 and stuff like that. Pete Doyle says, what's the current state of accessibility in Compose? Are there any timelines for upcoming improvements? I know that they're still being worked on, and this is like one of the biggest kind of like benchmark goals for us to sort of hit like a point of stability, like a 1.0 roadmap. The accessibility improvements are is one of the critical things that's sort of holding us back at this point. So we're definitely working on it. I don't have much to share because I'm not super involved in it, so sorry. But yeah, it's definitely something being worked on. Jet Zajak says, any plans on improving lazy APIs? Is it going to be stabilized before 1.0? I really wish it would become more composable. Yeah, good question. So definitely lazy APIs are actively being worked on as well. Some of the improvements are, yes, they're being worked on, and I believe that getting a more more robust and full lazy like implementation is something that we're saying that we need by 1.0. I'm pretty sure about that. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Good questions, people. So let's go back to the code. So again, cache and changed. There is a get ambient API, which I don't think is used by the compiler anywhere. Yeah, that wouldn't be used by the compiler. So I think we can get rid of that. Get rid of those two. Consume. Again, it's internal, so no internal can be a compiler API. So start providers, end providers, not internal and private. Yeah, so I think it was easy to like look in this class and think like, well, all of this is like kind of related to the compiler, but what I really want to do is just limit it directly to APIs that the compiler might generate calls to. So start and end are not. Let's see, current ambient scope private, so it's not. Default invalid is, so this is a boolean that we generate code that checks this boolean. I believe so anyway. Let me yeah. Okay. So that one is true. And so then the start blank group APIs, those are all real compiler APIs. Okay, so end defaults. End root, I don't think, yeah, it's private, so so inserting, interestingly, I think inserting used to be an API that we called, but I don't think it is anymore. So let me yeah, we don't use it here. Let's see if we look up inserting. Okay. All right. Yeah. So we don't use inserting anymore, and let's find out what the. I'm not sure if it's used publicly, because it would be nice if we could make that internal published API. Yeah, use it in the composer, and then emit. So this should become published API internal. Nice. And then let's look at all the compiler API again. I'm not sure if these go in the same order every time, but so join key, I believe we do call, yeah. Next slot. Honestly, not sure. Slot. I think we might use that for the remember optimization. Let's find out. It doesn't look like it. So yeah, I guess we just use cache and change. So yeah. So next slot, I think we can make this internal published, probably. Yeah, it's using Composable Lambda. All right, cool. So we'll make that internal and then published API. All right. I'm kind of okay. Well, I'll figure that out in a second. All right. So join key, skip current group. Not sure. Okay, so we use this. Yeah. All right, so that's definitely a Compose Compiler API. Skipping is Compose Compiler API. Skip to group end. That I believe is also yes. Okay. So I think start group, yeah, this is internal, so we don't use that. What we do, update value, it's internal, so we don't use that either. Okay. So scope update scope is Compose Compiler API because it's the result type of end restart group, and so I think that looks correct. We should continue to rely on that. So we don't need to mark this as yeah. So composable lambda is, I think this can just be opt-in compose compiler API. Like anything private, it's like we shouldn't mark it as that thing. Okay. All these, this is all correct. Okay, cool. So that's basically that. Now what I want to do is, so in Composer, we've done a file opt-in on internal, experimental, and compose, which I think makes sense. And so I noticed there's a lot of opt-in here, and I don't. So opt-in. We shouldn't need that or that. Like we should only like be opting in here, I think, for stuff that's what am I trying to say? Like if it's a annotation like this, that's defined in a different module, I think. So I think that's fine. And I'm not sure. I mean, so I don't think it makes sense. Well, maybe it does. I don't know. I'm not going to change that because someone, I guess, intentionally did that. So yeah, I'll change all these. So a few questions here. Ursus asks, how are projects like this led in terms of process? Probably not Agile, Scrum, right? Sort of depends on the team. So I think a lot of people, well, I think some people do, like, I mean, the problem is like Agile, Scrum, it's become so widespread that like everyone's version of what qualifies as Agile is like different. But yeah, I mean, there are several teams that work in the code base, and they all kind of have their own slightly different process. And then, you know, typical kind of umbrella structure, like, you know, there's teams and sub-teams and, you know, different frequency syncs between them and stuff like that. So hope that, I don't know if that clears it up or not, but I think it's hard to answer that specifically. Max Vargas says, my two last questions before going to bed. Do you have any must-have favorite Android Studio plugins? Will there be any improvements on working with previews in Android Studio to composable functions? I liked how fast XML previews was compared to having to build every time now. It feels so slow. Yeah, so this is definitely an area that we want to improve. I get you, totally agree. It needs to be faster than it is now for sure. I mean, so there will be improvements, but I guess I can't comment too much on it, like exactly what they'll be. Like, so, you know, I think what the studio team works on is a little bit more private, I guess. It's not open source. So, do you have any must-have favorite Android Studio plugins? I don't know. I mean, like, if you mean like actual like plugins that I would go to, like the plugins pane and install, I'm not really sure. I don't have much from just like what comes with the standard install. Shadowcast asks, do you have any advice for working on small teams? I've never had the chance to collaborate before, and it's honestly really frightening. It's a good question. Let me think about that. I mean, I definitely have worked on small teams before. So I don't know, like in your example, you're indicating you're like currently hiring for like a person number 2. I mean, I think when you're going from like, you know, 0 other people to 1 other person or n other people, you have to, I think you have to like slow down a little bit, and you have to be a little more thoughtful. And so it is like, it's interesting. I think in a lot of ways, this is probably true, where like your velocity with 1 person is probably faster than with 2. Because as soon as you get 2, then there's all these other things that you need to do, and you kind of slowed yourself down, potentially more than the other person is adding, at least at first. And so, I mean, if you haven't yet, like, invest a lot. I would invest in, processes that will help avoid kind of like issues. And if you want to grow the team from 2 people to more, then this will definitely pay off down the road. But like, so invest time in like some continuous integration kind of infrastructure, and making like some level of process. Like when it's just one person, like it's easy to like just push on master and like not open pull requests, and you never comment anything or test anything or like whatever. Like there's all these like sort of shortcuts that you're able to take, and try to be good, like proactive. Maybe even it's like start, if you haven't hired this person yet, then start doing this before you even hire them, so that on day one it's like it's an established thing. And even though it might even seem silly right now, like, so before pushing code, like do it in a PR, and like make sure you have the infrastructure set up to have some code review and stuff like that. And like that kind of opens this whole other bag of worms, which is like code review and all this. And like, even if you're working on 2 entirely separate things, I would recommend like definitely have if there's just 2 of you, like like code review everything, even if that's like out of context for the other person, or like they're supposed to be working on something else or whatever, like, because the like code review is like invaluable, but also the context that they'll gain from that code review will also be invaluable. And so definitely go down that path. And like you can introduce a lot of these things. Like it doesn't necessarily need to mean that like you have all of these like facilities, like auto-generated docs, or like everything's like crystal clean, perfect. But these types of things will start to be more and more important. And so invest in that. I think that definitely matters. Shadowcast says, I honestly wish I had code review. This is something I'm dying for. I totally understand what you mean. Like it is, especially like once you work at a big company, like if you go back to like working on a project yourself or something like that, you realize how valuable code review is. So I know what you mean. But yeah, I hope that was a helpful response. So thanks for asking it. All right, so it's interesting. I wonder if this like file level opt-in thing is like not working. All right, so I wonder what happens here when I do I run the update API call. Because if you look in my IDE, like a lot of this is becoming red. But it's weird because I've opted in at the file level. So maybe this doesn't work. I'm not sure. I definitely don't like this like sea of red that I'm getting here now. Let's see what happens. What I'm doing is I'm running update API from the command line, which in part will execute a compile, I think. And if any of these like opt-in flags and stuff like that are missing in the compiler's eyes, then it should catch that. So I'm wondering if just like the IDE is confused about how to interpret these flags. Yeah, which it looks like that's the case, I guess. Like this all worked fine. Which I can just validate here that if I remove that, then this will break, I think. Yeah. So Comic 103 just played Womp. I'm not sure if you were saying that I was looking at the wrong screen or not, but I was kind of intentionally looking at the terminal here because so this now happens. This is internal API, like, so this is like the opt-in thing failing, and that was because I commented this out. So this does convince me that doing this actually will opt in for the whole file. So yeah, I'm just gonna continue removing these opt-ins since looks like that they're not needed here. So I think they introduce a decent amount of noise. Okay, and I could probably write like a regular expression to just go and remove all these, but I think it's maybe a little bit helpful for me to just have a quick eye on each one anyway. Yeah. See, like this is okay because, well, these are private, so maybe it doesn't really make sense, but you know, marking one of these APIs as internal, that sends a signal externally, but opting in here, I think, doesn't matter. So yeah. I don't think these are needed. Yep. All right. Okay. Okay. That's basically all I wanted here. So. That all seems good, and I'm gonna do this update API just one more time. And then we'll wrap this up in a commit, and then I think that's gonna be it for me today. So thank you everyone for tuning in. Hope this was useful. I had fun. Y'all had some good questions today. So I will try and do another stream this weekend. Not sure if I'll get to it or not, to be honest. Things are just still kind of crazy right now, but I will see you all at the next stream, and have a good weekend. So cheers. Thank you.